What's up, Grizz Nation? Welcome into another Grizz Game Day update. Today, the Grizzlies will take on the Washington Wizards. It's actually the first night of a back-to-back for both teams. So we're getting fresh legs for both teams. Joining me from Washington is Chase Hughes. Chase, welcome back to the show once again. How you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, look, the Grizzlies have had a little bit in the start of the season, some unfortunate luck in the injury department. Everyone is back for us, excluding the guys who have been out the whole season. That's Zaire, Danny, and Jaren. But big news on your front, which could change today's full game.
Yeah, Bradley Beal is out. He's in health and safety protocols, so he'll miss at least tonight's game. And then, as you mentioned, they have a back-to-back. They go to Charlotte on Monday, so not great timing in that regard. But, you know, he was in health and safety protocol in the preseason, and he was only in there for like 48 hours. So these things can happen pretty quickly if you get cleared by testing. But it's not ideal because the Wizards are going up against one of the best offenses in the league with the Grizzlies, who are second in points per game and fourth in offensive rating. And compounding matters is they're already missing DeLon Wright, who is one of their best guards. And
former Grizzly.
He's a former Grizzly. And, you know, in a normal matchup, he'd probably guard Ja Morant. But now that Beal's out and Wright's out, their depth in the backcourt is really taking a hit.
Let's talk about the defensive end before we move on to the offensive end for Washington. Then you mentioned that DeLon might have had that matchup. How does it work now? Like, who stops Ja, who's having an unbelievable season, and Desmond also, like, the 1-2 punch of he's also been on fire lately. Like, what do you think those matchups look like?
Well, it's going to be interesting because last year they had some success against Ja Morant in Washington, but Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was the guy who guarded him, right? And now he's been traded to the Denver Nuggets, so he's not on the roster. DeLon Wright, if he was healthy, he would be the guy. I'm wondering if it's going to be Deni Avdija, who's their third-year forward. He's 6'9", so it's not like a traditional matchup against Ja Morant, but he's guarded the best player on every team that they've played so far. They've played 9 games, and when it was the Celtics, it was Jason Tatum. When it was the Nets, it was Kevin Durant. When it was the Cavs, it was Donovan Mitchell. So you can kind of see the range of players that he's matched up against. James Harden with the Sixers is another one. So it really doesn't matter who the best player is on the other team. It's generally Deni Avdija who guards him. Now, Deni Avdija right now is not starting. So I would imagine they begin the game with Monte Morris on him. And then about 4 or 5 minutes in, you'll see Deni Avdija come in and probably be assigned to Ja Morant, even though there's about a 6-inch height difference between them.
That's such an interesting thing to think about. Well, you were naming all these players, the Jason Tatums, the KDs, and I was like, okay, but these guys aren't point guards. Then you got to Donovan Mitchell, and I'm like, wait, so this forward really can, I mean, attempt to guard like smaller players. So this is gonna be interesting. Look, we talked about offensive rating. Bradley Beal is the leading scorer for this team, even though he's having one of his lowest scoring seasons of his career. Still 21 points a game. I mean, really, Porzingis and Kyle Kuzma, right, are the other 2 scorers on Washington. Who needs to step up tonight?
Well, yeah, I would start with those guys because they're very accomplished scorers. Of course, Porzingis has averaged 20 points per game. Many times in his career, he's actually averaging a career high in effective field goal percentage this year because he's shooting really well from 3. And Kuzma's been a little inconsistent this season offensively, but we saw last year when Beal went out around the trade deadline with a wrist injury that Kuzma stepped up and averaged 20 points per game the rest of the way. So when he's one of the primary scoring options and he doesn't have to defer to anyone and he can just naturally be aggressive and look for his own shot, it tends to work out pretty well. But beyond those guys, I would probably point to Will Barton next on that list. Of course, he played college basketball in Memphis, and he's a very accomplished scorer, and they've had him on their bench. I don't know if he's going to start in the place of Bradley Beal tonight because it could also be potentially Corey Kispert, who started in the place of Beal last year after he got hurt. But Will Barton is a guy who's been around a long time. He knows how to score the basketball, and he's the type of player that if you give him an opening, he'll take it. So I would imagine he's going to be very aggressive looking for his own shot tonight.
Well, and he's comfortable in this arena because, of course, the Tigers also play at FedEx Forum. So
there you go.
Something to be said about that. A couple more things I want to talk about is the offensive rebound. So the Grizzlies have made it one of their priorities is rebounding. We saw that in our last game with Steven Adams. He had 11 offensive rebounds, 19 total in the game, and then limiting second chance points for other teams. Is it Porzingis? Like, who's like the big rebounder for something that the Grizzlies are prioritizing? Who tries to stop that priority for the Grizzlies for Washington?
Well, that's going to be a tough matchup because they don't really have anyone on their roster who is as big and strong as Steven Adams. But the Wizards have been really good at defensive rebounding this year. They've been terrible at offensive rebounding. So it kind of averages out to be a pretty average rebounding team. But Kristaps Porzingis will be in there. You know, Kyle Kuzma is a pretty good rebounder. Daniel Gafford is kind of inconsistent as a rebounder. Same with Rui Hachimura. They're the 4 and the 5 in the second unit. But if they really struggle with rebounding, I wonder if they'll turn to Taj Gibson, who's their third center. And we haven't seen much of him this year, but he's one of the best players in the NBA at boxing out. So maybe you could have him go in there and just try to box out Steven Adams, because he's probably their strongest big man. And maybe that could clear the runway for other guys to get rebounds.
That's interesting. Ooh, this is going to be a fun game because I feel like there's going to be some names and lineups like shifted around that we maybe haven't seen all season. And I love that. Okay, the last thing was that I saw that Washington is the 4th best at transition defense. Like they're allowing the 4th least amount of points. Grizzlies like to get out and run. We mentioned Ja, but it's really all the guys. Like if you had watched last game, it was like everybody was just running. It's something that they led the league in all season last year. What's kind of like the key? What's been so great for Washington in transition D so far this year?
Well, they're a big team and they're a pretty fast team. You know, I think when you have like Denny Avdia and Rui Hachimura and Kyle Kuzma out there, that's a lot of length. But also I think the Wizards, one of the reasons why they're not a very good offensive rebounding team is because they get back on defense very quickly. They're very keen on stopping transition points. And, you know, I think it's one of the reasons why they have one of the better paint defenses in the league this year is because they get back and they don't allow teams to get out and run and get into the paint. But that's going to be a big test tonight. Also, the 3-point shooting of the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies are really good in the paint and shooting threes. And the Wizards have had some trouble. At least they had some trouble in their last game against the Brooklyn Nets in both of those areas because they let guys like Royce O'Neal for the Nets get wide open, and the Nets had 16 threes in that game, and they also won the paint battle by about 20 points. So those are some areas I'm going to be watching. Obviously, John Morant is unbelievably good at getting into the paint and scoring for a guard. He's 7th in the league in paint points this year, but he's really the only guy on the list who's not a big man or a wing. What he could do with his size is just incredible. So it's going to be a big test for the Wizards. But yeah, I would just say that they sell out on getting back on defense and also taking away 3-point attempts, and they'll kind of live with what comes with that as a domino effect. So just look out for that tonight when you watch the Wizards on defense. Yeah,
that was another thing that I had forgotten to mention. It was percentage wise. This is not attempt wise. Percentage wise, they're allowing the highest percentage from 3. And now again, that sample size is very small. Like this is the 10th game of the season, and if you're taking away attempts, a lot of the time more are going in. You know, it's a smaller number are getting up, so a bigger number can go in, but it's going to be something to watch. My last thing, I'm going to say Kyle Kuzma, the last time he played in Memphis had 30 points, 4 for 8 from the 3-point. So I just think maybe it's another night for him. Will Barton does always play well here, so it's something to watch out for. The last game in Memphis for us, it was kind of like a team thing. Like Ja and Des didn't have a big game. It was really led by Steven and Dylan. I expect Ja to have another big game tonight. So I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah, one thing we won't get, you mentioned Dylan Brooks. We won't get the Dylan Brooks-Bradley Beal matchup. That's always a good one. So I don't know who he's going to be guarding if Beal's not out there.
What's your guess?
Probably Will Barton. I think whoever starts at the 2, they'll put Dylan Brooks on, and he's a really good defender. He's had some success against Beal in the past, so it's not going to be easy for whoever is guarded by him.
Yeah, well, I would be okay with a Dylan Will Barton matchup for sure. I think, you know, like a little Memphis Tiger or Memphis, like, I don't know what I call Dylan, like just like the bulldog on defense is going to be fun no matter what. Chase, thank you for coming on today. I hope you have a great game covering it, and I'm just excited. 5 o'clock tips are so weird for me. So Memphis fans, if you're watching, it is 5 o'clock because it's Sunday and we want you to get lots of sleep and get ready for work tomorrow. But 5 o'clock tips are so weird. I feel like I need to like run over to the arena right now and just like get things started.
And with daylight savings, it's going to throw a lot of people off.
Oh my gosh, yes, we got an extra hour of sleep, lots of things happening. Again, Chase, thank you so much. And Grizz Nation, if you're staying at home tonight, you can watch the game on Bally Sports East and the Bally Sports Plus app.